Welcome everyone to Designing Healthy Environments. My name is Alicia Ponce and I'm the founder and principal of APMonarch, where we are architects and sustainability consultants designing healthy environments. And this week, this Monday morning, October 26th, we welcome Gabe Wilcox, Associate Principal at FAR Associates. Gabe is an award-winning architect with 14 years of experience designing high-performance sustainable buildings. He has completed complex projects from science and biology labs to historic adaptive products while simultaneously integrating LEED Platinum and Living Building Challenge certifications into the design. And I would say not just LEED Platinum and Living Building, but there are so many other certification systems that are, we can cherry pick now, as Gabe likes to say. And that's what is so helpful, when you're working on a commercial office, when you're working on an adaptive reuse building, is that, we have these tools and these resources and now, proven experience, right, to be able to implement these different design strategies in the buildings. So Gabe here is going to talk to us about indoor air quality and health materials. Get ready, everyone. This is going to be good.
Thank you, Alicia. That was a great intro, and I think you kind of hit the nail right on the head, where it's important to look at all these different certification systems and understand what the differences are, and as more as a tool or a resource for all the designers on the call are out there, because you can really kind of just take the best of the best, even if your client can't afford or is not exactly interested in the certification. There's no reason you can't steal great ideas from each one of these well-documented and required manuals that all these institutions put out there. But I think that it's kind of important to start with the why. Why are we having this conversation at all about indoor air quality and healthy materials, and to kind of put it into a frame of perspective? I think currently in our society, what's happening with the mainstream media and everything right now, indoor air quality is becoming a big topic, and there's a lot of discussion around it and how to improve it, mostly related to viruses. But what I'd like to do is kind of give us the full, well-rounded approach to it. And I think it's best to describe health and carbon kind of simultaneously and how they are related. Carbon is an essential building block of our bodies, but also it's a measurement. It's a way that we can boil down everything from materials to energy use and use it as a scale. And that's specifically CO2. Health is also something everyone can relate to, and it's something we take pretty personal. So I want to also give it a full, well-rounded approach. And not only should you care about your physical health and how you feel, but also your mental health. It's a balance, and working with those two things as well is equally important, as most of us know. So buildings are really the same way. Everything should always be a full rounded approach. So there's never just materials or indoor air quality. There's so many things related to a healthy interior environment, ranging from how you feel thermally, from your comfort and ability to adjust and control your environment, daylighting, nutrition, biophilic environment that's bringing that nature indoors, but also mimicking it and figuring out kind of the essence of nature in your design. And then also gives your design engaging you to be active in a physical, working environment for your body. Mm-hmm. So these are all important things. And why this is important is because we as humans spend the majority of our lives indoors. What I'm doing right now, what Alicia is doing right now, and where we sleep 8 hours a day, hopefully getting 8 hours. And if we're not inside a building, we're traveling in a vehicle or a train or a bus to a building to sit in. So our time outside is very limited. And that's to just kind of prove that this is how that space that you live in or work in should be really important to the health of your body. So let's take a look at carbon. This is why local materials, I've highlighted local, is really important, because embodied energy is essentially related to carbon. What does it take to manufacture, then transport your product to its job site? And that all is tied to carbon. We're currently way past this 2018 average right now, being 2020, and this is the actual record amount of parts per million carbon dioxide in our environment. And for the last 800,000 years, it stayed relatively consistent, but fluctuating up and down, but not peaking really past this 300 parts per million scale. And what that essentially equates is really good, healthy air until the current state that we're in, and it's constantly increasing, as we all know. We're not fossil fuel independent right now. So what does that mean to us? As carbon increases, climate changes. And this is just, you're witnessing it right now with the record extremes. And there's two emission scenarios, a higher emission and a lower emission. And what does that mean for the state of Illinois? Is as those emissions tend to increase, our climate changes drastically, and it actually gets a lot warmer. So the predictions that they're showing is we could be the climate of East Texas or Louisiana with the same extremes we have today in Illinois, because we are isolated to the center of the nation, a large landmass. Mm-hmm. This is the data from the Chicago Climate Action Plan. We have seen record heating degree days. This is days projected over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hot, and when it's humid, it's deadly. The leading cause of death is in a natural disaster scenario, whether it's a hurricane or something that devastates an area, is related to heat. And that's typically because air conditioning, essential resources, and the electric grid gets knocked out. And a lot of people suffer because of that. So if you want to tie health to anything, it's staying alive and being able to get through these really extensive 100-degree days. And again, there's these two projections for these scenarios, the higher emission in red and the lower emission in yellow.
Mm-hmm. Now, for those of you listening, don't say, "Oh my God, what's happening?" This is now we're gonna get into, we have the knowledge and the resources to be able to, reduce that and make and design healthier environments. So we want to understand the why we're doing this, or where it came from. So every time I have these conversations, it's like, okay, Alicia, think about, okay, this is not just a morbid details, but okay, now let's talk about solutions, because there are solutions.
Yeah, that's a great point. So that's the whole reason with the how. So we know why are we doing what we're doing, and to give you motivation, let's say, but there's a how. So we've been equipped with all these great resources and tools and certification systems to really make a healthy environment. And let's kind of explore those. So here's a good map, just a grid of all the sustainable certification systems out there, most largest in the US, so to speak. There are multiple others for Europe and other countries as well, but this is kind of the leading ones here in the Americas. And we kind of start on the left with the grandfather of the system, the start of it with LEED green building certifications. And then as you move to the right, these are the areas that I tend to lean towards or really try to push towards clients, because they're the most aggressive, not just in terms of energy or water, but everything. It's a good holistic approach. For example, Living Building Challenge, and they have a series of subpedals all the way down from net zero to zero carbon. Now, LEED is responding to that by having their own LEED Zero system. Some of these you may be familiar of as well. Energy Star, you can get rated facilities for that, and WaterSense labeled. A lot of it ties to products. So these are all great certification systems to review. But the bigger question is, what does your client even qualify for? Some of these they may not, because they don't own the building and they're leasing. And this is an example where I was working on a project with interior design for a high school, and they were going to be a tenant and just doing an interior build out. So they only qualified for really these systems to certify their project. It doesn't mean you can't, again, cherry pick or figure out the best of the best from the other systems as well. So that's just one thing you really want to review as far as the requirements go for the certification systems. Let's take a kind of an in-depth, more deeper dive into the RESET standard. This is a standard that really focuses a lot on air quality, and I love their tagline. It's so spot on with what they do. It says we can survive for weeks without food, we can survive for days without water, but we can only survive a few minutes without air. So they really pushed on how important air is. If you don't breathe and you're not breathing quality air, it's directly affecting your health.
Yeah.
And we look back at that illustration I had about the carbon dioxide levels in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
This is the pre-industrial era here. This is the CO2 map at about 280. So that's where we were a majority of the existence of the Earth, kind of fluctuating below 300. We're currently in a city's environment, a little bit around the 500, 600 parts per million of carbon in the air. So one thing I do want to point out is once those carbon dioxide levels rise in a building, you start to lose certain functions. And one of them is cognitive impairment, cognitive dysfunction occurring at 2,500 parts per million. And we happen to have a CO2 monitor in our office at Farr Associates, and multiple times I've gone out and checked it when we have a large conference and a lot of people in the conference room, and it's easily hitting 2,000, if not higher. And so what do we do as a society? We all gather in conference rooms and we make really big decisions with poor air quality. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. So there's methods and ways to actually adjust that, increase airflow. You can tie the airflow directly into CO2 monitors. So when they sense a room is full, that's called demand ventilation. That's really simple to do.
These are project teams that come, certify at a very high level, So imagine if the air was at a lower CO2 level.
Yeah, something to pay attention to in your next meeting. Maybe crack a window if you have that opportunity. But then also the VOCs are important. That's all related to indoor air quality and materials. And most people are probably familiar with LEED in the building flush out phase. This is pretty common. During construction, there's a lot of sealants, paints, and things on the wall. Even though they may be low to no VOCs still have less than 50 parts per million VOC. So it's a really nasty environment during construction, and there's a flush out phase required where you cycle the systems, you change out all the filtration media, and you clean the space. And that actually gets you down low enough to pass. Once you pass and you get your plaque and your medal and you move on, the numbers tend to spike right back up. And that's because the owner brings in supplies, things, furnishings later. People bring in hairsprays and whatever. A lot of things contribute to the air quality, and the materials continue to off-gas for a decent amount of time. So that rises right back up, and you're right back where you started. So Reset really focuses on analyzing, testing, and monitoring that air quality. And they have standards for parts per million, VOC, CO2, and so on. And one of the most important things of the Reset standard is they have approved monitors, Reset certified monitors to calculate that VOC. Why is that important? This image on the bottom right is a great explanation. I think the CO2 monitor in the middle is off-gassing to the one behind it because it's got nasty mercury or things in it, and they're all just not related equal. So, you could buy a VOC monitor for your home, but it might not be that valuable to you because it might not work that well. So it is important to have them quality. Now, I just want to point out on the left, these diagrams on how you can increase the air quality. We all know this with the pandemic we're in. Increased fresh air and filtration is one of the biggest methods you can do that. I do want to point out when you increase air, you drive up energy. So you're burning more fossil fuels, which is carbon is related to health. So there are methods to actually balance that. An ERV is an energy recovery ventilator. It balances the heat going out of your building in the winter and transfers it to the incoming air. And these systems can actually do it really efficiently now. They're upwards of high 80s, sometimes low 90s on how much percentage of that heat they can transfer. Also, living machines is a really exciting thing that can help clean the air, filter it naturally through plants. The plant right behind me, that's a money tree. It actually sequesters formaldehyde from the air. And that's a nasty toxic chemical, and the plant just absorbs it, buries it in the roots, and don't eat it. But it's a method that you can use in your interior environments. Active design guidelines. Here's some documents you can just download. You can find them. There's toolkits for schools. There's toolkits for offices. But what active design guidelines is all about is are you physically able to move through your space, and is it designed to encourage that? Do you have methods of getting to a stair? Do you even know where the stair is in your office building? Probably not, because it's been buried behind fire-rated walls and so on. So there's a lot of good methods to create that active component in your workplace or your home and make it engaging for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's important to me, is that the way you move around a building should be intuitive, especially if you're not familiar with the building. Think about, somebody who's going to their doctor appointment, on the third floor of, it should be intuitive, right? And so with these like sustainable design strategies, I think it can be done very beautifully, and
Yeah,
and also
here's
taking into consideration like the physical ability of a person. All of that is meshed in.
Yeah, here's a great active design guideline little bullet tied to health. This is a publication out of Doug's book, actually, where climbing 20+ flights of stairs a week reduces your risk of stroke and of death from similar related illnesses by 20%. So if you're climbing stairs and getting active, you're just reducing your ability to die. Essentially, it's a morbid thing to say, but it just is kind of, we all know that fitness and activity is good. So let's make our buildings actually work for us, where they become a tool for that. The Well Building Standard is probably like the best interior healthy air measure and creation of, to create a really good environment for you. And why? Because a lot of physicians got together, published reports, journals, and tied everything in their document to your body. So they talk about the lymphatic system, the nervous system, and there's this great little chart right here where that's what the manual looks like. It ties organs of your body to why we need natural daylight and circadian rhythm tuning of light temperature, and what does that affect in our bodies. So this is one of the really good interior air quality certification systems. And again, it's got a lot of measures and requirements that also give you a range of certification, no different than LEED, because LEED had adopted it. But it's a great cherry picking document. You can find the access to water I use on about every project now. That's an easy one, where you just make sure there's hydration stations, drinking fountains, or bottle filling stations every 100 feet. So you give people the access to remind them, oh, I should probably get hydrated again. That's another good thing. Water is essential.
Yeah, they're walking all those stairs now.
They will need, yeah. That's what we did at Keller. We located the water fountain directly next to the communal stair in the atrium, where it's right on display and inviting for you to use. One thing I do want to say about Well is I feel like this standard is the me standard. It's all about me, my space, my interior air quality. And it doesn't really address sustainability on a broader perspective of the exterior environment. What are you doing by increasing air quality and humidification and so on, and energy? What are you expelling out in terms of carbon? So it doesn't really identify and address that. Just want to point that out. It also does require recertification. That's valuable for your clients to know.
Yeah.
Fitwell, this is kind of the blend between active design guidelines and Well. I haven't done a Fitwell certified project, but I have reviewed the manual and go through it, and it has a lot of good methods and practices that you can incorporate into your project. But I've not personally done one. I would love to. It seems very focused on the indoor air quality and health. It also has some really unique options over here, like supports social equality for your vulnerable populations and people that might be coming to the workplace. So they have a lot of policy related standards in place that would affect the occupants using it. Lead operation and maintenance for interiors. This is kind of the newest version that they had. There's also, this is interiors O&M, again, because this kind of was crafted for an interiors high school consultant, where they didn't have the ability to certify. They just didn't have the funds available to do it. So what we did is created a self-certification guideline for them, where we analyzed the best of each system and kind of, again, took them and made their own standard. One item that I highlighted here and I think is important is that green cleaning policy. I'm surprised to see it on here as a prerequisite, then also credits. That's because it proves that the chemicals you use to clean are just so tied to that VOC and indoor air quality. And this is one of those credits that I would always do an innovation and design for on any other LEED certified project, because it's pretty easy to maintain just by specifying certain green guard chemicals, not chemicals, but a lot of them are natural occurring cleaners that you use, and you create a policy and a guideline for the owner so they don't impact the healthy indoor air quality you just created in a great architectural design in a space, and then they go dump nasty chemicals all over it. So it's something you really want to be mindful of, and that also ties back to that chart of the VOC timeline. How they spike back up is directly tied to the cleaning policies in place of that school or project you might have.
Have you seen that as a challenge? If you're going to implement a cleaning policy, then oftentimes some organizations have purchasing agreements, right? Is it like what kind of challenges have come up with that?
It's always a challenge. And especially I work with a lot of higher ed institutions, and there are chains of command and approvals and essentially a board review. And, there's a lot of levels and layers, and a lot of the janitorial staff or cleaning crews are used to using what they use or hired independently as an agency that comes in. Now you can select green cleaners online and hire them directly to clean your space, or if it's in-house, you just need to convince the powers that be that control those decisions to change the policy. And the whole way you do that is start with the why. You start with, here's why this is important.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
And
if
a
you
lot
can
of
convince
these
them,
companies are already doing it, but it's just, it takes several conversations.
That's right. And I think the important thing to know is that you start with this early. You don't do this after the project's done and built, and you're like, oh, you got to change your construction cleaning policy or your cleaning policy. You kind of start with that in the beginning in your integrated design workshop or kind of early schematic design phases. Start thinking through operations. Local materials, we'll switch over to kind of why this is important again. We talked about carbon, and we'll look at two certification systems here. This is an analysis we had to do for the KELLER Center that Alicia mentioned in the beginning, where we were LEED Platinum certified and Living Building Challenge certified in materials petal. So what they had is two different requirements. LEED looks at manufactured and extracted. That's the extraction of the material ingredients from the earth, whereas LBC just looked at manufactured. That's what they cared. But they also wanted your consultants to be within a specific radius for travel purposes and so on. So this is a really kind of interesting diagram to see how those two systems compare. And whenever one was less restrictive than the other, we would always take the more restrictive requirement. And that's something to understand when you're working with specs and multiple certification systems. Just have a note in there that the greater, more restrictive requirement always wins. Same with code. You would do the same thing with ADA code. Healthy materials, if you have resources in your architectural library or a good architectural library or reaching out to consultants, this is a great resource, the mindful materials. And they put a label right on your binder that sits on the library so you can identify, oh, those are the green healthy materials that have been documented. And then usually on that label, they list out these certification systems. So no different than the certification systems we saw for buildings in the beginning, each one of those certification systems tie to material requirements that have their own independent certified requirements. So we have a Cradle to Cradle, for example, and Declare, which are third-party certification systems that prove a material is healthy. And they go through a rigorous standard to either look at every single ingredient and confirm what is included in it, or they look at its life cycle. What is its total end of life use? And that's its environmental declaration. That's this EPD right here.
How would you say the industry has changed in the last 10 years with all of these labels, and how green building really pushed to be transparent, really, right?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you kind of already answered your own question. Is transparency, I think, became the big deal. So when you go buy a can of soup or a box of cereal, you get a nutrition label on that food because you might care what's going into your body that you consume. materials are no different. Your skin is your biggest organ, and it can absorb VOCs and chemicals just as easily. So that's something that you really want to be mindful of, is what are these chemicals or ingredients in each product, and how are they going into, how are they getting approved and going into the system? So the industry in general, these certification systems have pushed them to disclose everything that's in their product. Tell me what's in it. If I'm going to be sitting on a chair, does it have halogenated flame retardants in it? And am I rubbing it into my skin 8 hours a day? That's something you'd want to know. You know?
Yeah.
I also do want to point out FSC wood. This is really important. We talked about formaldehyde with the plant behind me that absorbs it. You want to also be a steward of your environment and make sure you're sourcing wood responsibly, and it's FSC certified. But one thing everyone should understand is formaldehyde occurs naturally in wood. That's unavoidable. It's natural. But the added urea formaldehyde is what you really want to avoid. That's a preservative product that they add into it, and you can simply request wood without it. Here's another kind of best of the best list we put together for our client, trying to get them to a certification that they couldn't afford. So we said, okay, we want to talk about energy. AIA 2030 is a really good target to meet how to get carbon neutral by 2030. And it has aggressive energy measures required for your building and lighting power density, the amount of lights, watts per square foot that are required. And that is what we started with. Also Energy Star, just specify Energy Star appliances. Carbon is related to health, remember, so the less energy you produce, the better that will be. There's also a Energy Star portfolio manager that's free. Every building, every project can register that, and you can enroll and track your building's energy use, and you get a rating for that. Water sense, water is so critical. It's kind of the new frontier, and we've unfortunately lived with really affordable water for so long that it's not a concern here, but it is growing, and it's something everyone should be aware of. Just simply specify water sense labeled products, and you'll have really low flow, really high quality fixtures meeting that. And then we already talked about just the material certification standards and all the types that are out there. Green Seal, I do want to point out, that's that cleaning one that you really want to look at for green cleaning. They have a ton of products, and that you could just reference that the owner must purchase Green Seal certified products. Lighting, if you have the opportunity to naturally daylit your space, that's the best thing you can do. A lot of interior build out projects might not have access to light. They might not have, you know, that ability to do that. So one thing I do want to point out that is I found in the well building standard is the importance of circadian rhythm lighting. And that's essentially color tuning. And your phone has it, I'm sure everyone is kind of aware of it to a degree, but the sun is really low in temperature in the morning and when it sets, like 35 to 3000 Kelvin. At midday, it's really hot and bright. And that's this image on the right here in the lower series of images where it's about 6000 Kelvin. That's really cold, and that activates us. It stimulates our bodies to get up, be active, and do things. When the sun's setting, it's telling our bodies to shut down, calm down, you're getting ready to go to bed soon, melatonin is released, and so on. So these are important things that your body should go through and tie to your health so you can sleep at night. If your client is aware of this, you really won't educate them and get them incorporated into the project. It's really easy to do with lighting controls these days. We did a zone of this in the KELLER Center. It was so well naturally daylit that we didn't have to do it, and that's one thing worth noting. If you have access to natural daylight, you really don't have to be concerned with color tuning. But we did it as an educational tool to show them that this is a simple lighting control on the wall that allows the the light fixtures to adjust to the sun's temperature throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things, it's like when people are finally occupy the building, it's just, one knows when you feel good in a space, right? And you may not necessarily know why, it is the circadian, we'll have a conversation, what's the circadian, lighting design, right? But the person working in their space, it just feels better, and that way they will perform better and enjoy their space.
Yeah, that is true. daylighting just kind of makes everyone feel better, and to think about how you control that light is really important, especially in these long Chicago winters. The ability to have some direct sun on your face and maybe an active lobby atrium space is really important. Get that vitamin D. Here's, again, this master list that we prepared for a client that talks about kind of the best things you could do if you're not certifying. I just want to point out a few of them. MERV 13 filters. Throughout every certification system, they reference an ASHRAE standard 62.1, which your mechanical engineer will readily know. And then MERV 13 was really important to meet, both Living Building Challenge, WELL, and LEED. Right now in the pandemic, there's a lot of discussion about a better filtration that can actually filter out virus particles, and that's MERV 16. So we're moving up from the 13 to the 16 in a pandemic-related world to filter out even finer, smaller particles. And that's really important because at 13, we'll remove the majority of the small particulate matter that can get lodged into your lungs. Carbon monoxide was an item we focused on with this client. That's why it's in bold red, because at one point they were looking at a tenant space with a garage, a parking garage in a high rise located above them. And this is something to really be cognizant of, is where in the environment are you putting this tenant or your client, and to understand what can happen on the adjacent floors. For example, carbon monoxide is the byproduct of fossil fuel production from vehicles, and it's an odorless gas that's poisonous. And it actually has weight, it drops. And with the parking garage above you, what we noticed was a bunch of holes and cracks in this slab and poorly sealed spaces where carbon monoxide would essentially rain down on the students if you thought about it. So we really wanted them to monitor the carbon monoxide levels and set them at a strict standard so that could alarm and tell them that, hey, you're getting larger carbon monoxide levels than you should, and kick on some fans. That's this control ventilation system, demand ventilation system. But most importantly, we were really going to seal up and get that slab of concrete really well sealed so it wouldn't penetrate through.
That's amazing.
I
mean, you guys are very, very thorough in your observations. Not many people would go ahead and do that.
Well, even worse, there was a fitness space below it, and they had a pool, and chlorine was coming up from the pool, and you could smell it. So now we had to seal that space below and keep chlorine from coming in. It's like, it was a terrible location to be for a tenant, but they ultimately ended up selecting a different location. And we talked a little bit about these living machines, and what I would just want to point out is like the green wall aspect of it. They're technically pretty energy intensive to support a living wall in your space. They're beautiful, but they do come with a lot of nutrient and watering requirements. And I'd recommend, if you're doing one, make it an active system, tie it into your mechanical system. And what the plants do is you bring the exhaust air, the return air that goes back into the system to be recirculated, pass it past a bunch of plants, and those plants will naturally filter out the particles and VOCs from the air. And that's a way to kind of create your own filtration media. And these systems are available prepackaged, and they have them that are even freestanding that you can put in office spaces. Okay, so we've done a little bit of why we're doing this, how we can achieve them, and then let's look at what we did. And this is a great celebration moment for Alicia and myself, where she mentioned the KELLER Center project that we worked on together that achieved both Living Building Challenge pedal certification. That's a very aggressive way to meet healthy material requirements. And then we also achieved LEED Platinum certification. The two images on the left, you're seeing this active stair that we were referencing as well. This is a communal stair made for you to travel up all 4 flights, daylit, and made to be attractive, extra wide landings so you can engage and socially talk to people on that. It becomes a place for interaction. Materials were so important here. I do want to point out the importance of salvaged and reused materials. Again, we talked about that embodied energy and how that's directly related to carbon. Well, if you don't have to produce a new material, that's a great way to just lower its embodied energy. Just use salvaged, recycled products. There's plenty out there.
Gabe, like, I mean, you could add to this too, but walking through during construction, how like odorless it was, and how, you know, people were walking around without masks, you know, you name it. And it was just, I walked with the the facilities director, and she was just like, oh my God, they're painting, she made a comment, something about like, should we wear a mask? And I said, no, this is the one place you don't have to wear a mask.
That's right. Yeah. So that's because of this declare requirement. So we had to meet, the rigorous red list requirements for Living Building Challenge. And that new car smell, the new building smell you probably notice when you walk into a space with the paints that Alicia is referring to, that's VOCs. That's that's what that new car smell is. It's off-gassing of paints and sealants. And when you specify a product that's proven to not have those harmful chemicals in it, that is one way to ensure that you're already going to set off the client with a healthy interior. And this is an example where we had to meet at least 23 declare labeled products. And that's the method for the transparency in your ingredients to eliminate red list, the most toxic chemicals in our environment from those ingredients. And we actually use like 36 of them. And we just, it's a great website, a great resource. Anyone can go to declare.com and find a series of pre-approved products. The salvage bronze pendants there, we just relanced with LEDs. So a really simple method. We found salvage chalkboards. Here on the wall, salvage reclaimed wood we also did, and we had floors, so we just sealed them and put a whitewash coat of sealant on it, and it was good to go. So I think it's really important to use salvage materials, and there's a lot of resources for that. I'd love to do another presentation on all of the resources available for that.
Yeah, got to do it.
Yeah, but let's talk, we'll just finish this whole presentation up with one of the client's favorite stories, this reclaimed ash wood that we use for the project. That's this wood you see on the ceiling and in the forum element. This is the large gathering atrium space. And we had looked at multiple salvage reclaimed products for this to use. We were looking at possibly salvage wood from local homes in the area that become demolished. That was a big problem on the south side of Chicago. So to make a policy statement with that was an area we were thinking, but where we ultimately ended up was reusing reclaimed ash from down Chicago Park District trees. And this is an invasive species, the emerald ash borer, that just devastated a lot of the ash trees in the area and would kill the tree. Well, what we ended up doing was having a conversation with the local artist, the Astor Gates, about how to integrate art into the space. And he went off on a different tangent, was like, hey guys, I got a bunch of wood that I got from the city of Chicago, from this, the ash trees. And we were like, okay, we're interested. And we just started working and collaborating with him. And he'd always wanted to open a mill in the local area. And what he did is exactly that. And we sole spec'd his material to use on the project. And that wood shop is only located like 4 blocks away now from the project we were working on. And he's training local employees of the area on the skills and crafts of woodworking. And this is just a beautiful story of full circle sustainability, where you have an environmental impact. You're using a salvage resource that was on its way to the landfill. There's a social requirement for that, and then an economic. So he's kind of created this full circle sustainability notion of stimulating local economies, having it local to your project, and that is Dorchester Industries, just south of the Keller Center in Hyde Park. And here's the product. It was a beautiful product that we kind of ran wild with once we had him as a connected material source. We ran it all the way up the belly of the stairs going 4 flights to really add that warmth to this kind of concrete shell of the space and extend it through the project. It flanks entries as well. And it's one of the owner's most celebrated stories on the project. And that's it.
Bravo. That was great. That was great, because I mean, now for those watching or watch later, we do share these talks on LinkedIn and YouTube. And so we have a series, we have a library actually now. This is our 21st episode. I'm gonna take the share screen off. Do you want to remove that?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so yeah, this is our 21st episode, and talking about the different design strategies to be able to design and build healthy environments. you know, and so it's been really, really a wealth of information from engineers to policymakers to architects. Next month, we're going to talk a little bit more on policy with water. We're going to have our special guest from the water reclamation and find out what types of efforts and advocacy is happening on their end as well, because as you know, water is a challenge here and locally to be able to, you know, conserve water.
That's great.
Any opportunities or challenges that you would like to leave us with, and opportunities for us to lead that you see out there? Because we're not only designing, but we also become advocates, right? So we have to advocate for these types of things to happen. Any thoughts on that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think kind of consistent with the presentation would be just to do your research and see what's out there from the certification standards. For example, I had looked at 9-10 different certification standards and just created a grid and looked at the best of what everyone was doing. And you'll find new information, new ideas that you didn't think were possible or even important. Like nutrition is something that you might not think about in an architectural project. And how do you educate a client about that and why it's important? For example, the well building standard it wants at your impulse buying counter, if you have a cafeteria or a kitchen component in your project, to have bananas, fruits, and, you know, healthy things at the impulse buying counter instead of the Snickers and the other elements that you typically see at a grocery store. And I think these little nudges, these little things can really move behavior and is essentially your health in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, great point. And then lastly, I ask guests, what recommendation do you have on books or journals? What are you currently reading?
I unfortunately read a lot of like futuristic sci-fi related things. So it's usually where we're going in the next hundreds of two. Yeah, well, it all ends up being sci-fi related because just the way that technology is moving so fast. I think a really good book that I will kind of relate everything back to is Paul Hawken. I imagine most people are familiar with that author. He's got a great book called Blessed Unrest, and it's about kind of the movement towards sustainable design or sustainability in general, and how it's an innate response within our bodies, because believe it or not, we're tied to this natural ecosystem, even though we've separated ourselves so far from it and the interior worlds, that we're actually still a part of it. And with this climate increase, all of these devastating things we're seeing occurring in the world, there's been a large increase of sustainable initiatives, not just from companies and people, but just interest in general and education. And he's linking it to an innate response in our bodies to preserve ourselves, no different than adaptation of a species. So it's a really interesting read if you want to feel a little bit of doom and gloom, but a little bit of happy at the end.
That's how it starts, but we need the happy at the end. And there is, because we're able to do that. And yeah, we had another guest, an ecologist also, and talked about, you know, what ecology means to begin with. And it's the study of our home, right? The study and how we take care of it, right? And which it's our bodies and our environments, the buildings of which we occupy. So thank you so much, Gabe. It's really wonderful to see you. And I know you guys are doing amazing work in our fight against climate change and, you know, reducing those carbon emissions. So no, I really appreciate all the information that you shared this morning, and for everyone, because it's out there. We can do it and you know, design healthy buildings.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. A pleasure as always. And anytime, let me know.
All right. Have a healthy week. Bye-bye.
Bye.